with a whole lot of truth. Remedy Revolution is here for you. Ooh. And now here's your host, Erin Page.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Remedy Revolution podcast. My name is Erin, and today's guest is somebody actually from France who I'm very excited to have on the podcast. It's a company that I've been following for a really long time. And the products that they offer are a bit unique. And it's actually something that we've never really talked about on the podcast, except for maybe superficially. So I'm excited to jump into electromagnetic frequencies, or EMFs, with the founder of a company called HAVN, Arthur Menard. Thank you so much for being here.
Aaron, thanks for having me. Super excited to be here.
Yeah, so first of all, I'd love to find out a little bit about your background and why you decided to conquer this problem of electromagnetic frequencies. Was it personal for you, or was it just kind of a problem that you saw needed to be solved?
I guess it's personal. I grew up with two grandparents who were battling cancer for most of my life. And that interest ended up culminating in a master's degree in engineering and biology. My very first job then was studying the genomic patterns of prostate cancer. And through this, I became exposed to the research on EMF and went down the rabbit hole. And this is where I figured that it was a big problem that where we had enough science to understand to know today that EMF has an adverse biological effect, and yet that we were moving towards a world of more and more exposure. And there's always a lag between the studies being completed and the science starting to evolve to awareness, public awareness. And so realized that as public awareness would grow, the public would have a rightful need to be protected, and set out to build that protection.
So I'd love to hear a bit about some of the scientific papers that have been released, because I think a lot of people think EMF, if we just kind of back up a little bit, even just a few years ago, they hear the words EMF and they think that it's just some woo-woo kind of thing and very new agey or whatever. Why do I need to protect myself from something that I can't see or feel the effects of, directly? So, I'd love to hear a little bit about that journey for you from a scientific engineering kind of a perspective, and also from the biological perspective. What did you find that really started you down this path? Was there some specific piece of information that made you feel like, wow, this is really something that needs to be addressed?
There was definitely a aha moment for me. And that moment where was when I found out that EMF radiation are categorized as a class 2B human carcinogen by the World Health Organization, which is the same categorization as car exhaust fumes. And when it comes to, you mentioned it before, we can't feel or see or smell EMF. We can smell gasoline. And if we had a car running next to us right now, we'd probably shorten that podcast if we were just breathing all that good gasoline in. And so the reality is we have the same with regards to our EMF exposure, but we don't realize it because we don't smell it, contrary to pollution and car exhaust fumes in particular. So that was for me the moment where I was like, okay, I gotta dive into the science here. What is the research actually saying? And this is where I found that first of all, there is over 2,200 high-quality, peer-reviewed scientific studies that link EMF exposure to various adverse biological effects. And from a disease perspective, to higher risks of cancer, neurological disorders, and cardiovascular disease. But also that this was a field where, unfortunately, there was a lot of misunderstanding by the public, a lot of misconceptions about EMF, and a lot of bad science as well. And so there's a big difference between good science and bad science, and a lot of that difference comes from where the funding is from.
Right.
Um, and um, and so when you're looking at the high quality independent studies, the picture is very clear.
So how do we know what our EMF exposure is? Because, we can't see it. We definitely can't, feel it on our skin or anything like that. We can't smell it. So, um, are there specific tools that are now utilized in order to measure the EMFs? And are there tools out there that maybe people should steer clear of? Because, like you said, there are a lot of lots of bad science that's out there. So, likewise, are there tools that maybe aren't the best at gauging what the levels of EMF might be in our spaces?
I love this question, Aaron. Because I think, as you said, if we can't see it, it doesn't feel as real. There are tools called EMF meters,
Mhm,
which allow you to measure the amount of EMF radiation that you have in around you and that different devices emit. The one thing to watch out for when buying an EMF meter is to buy one that is a high quality EMF meter. If you go on Amazon and you get the cheaper versions of these devices, you'll end up having something that measures electrical fields instead of electromagnetic fields. And
mhm,
uh, an EMF radiation is an electrical field combined with a magnetic field, so it's going to be different. We actually did a lot of work on sourcing the best quality EMF meter we could with HAVN, and we offer it currently on our website. You can buy it from anywhere, not necessarily from us, but that was the best one we could find from a user-friendly perspective and a price point perspective. So if you're willing to spend a little under $200, you are then able to actually audit your environment and your devices to understand, well, is my Oura Ring emitting a lot of EMF compared to an Apple Watch, for instance? Do I have more EMF in my bedroom and by my head when I'm sleeping, or in my office where I'm spending most of my day?
mhm.
And I think like this is probably the first step if you can spare the money in order to realize how much exposure you're under and what are the devices that are emitting a lot of radiation. And then for the second part of your question, besides not getting a high quality meter, which would only measure electric fields, I would steer away from any devices that claim to harmonize or purify or the words that they use change all the time, and it's often quantum technology or what have you that supposedly filter out the EMF from your room or from your devices. There is no scientific basis in any of this. EMF are used by our devices to communicate with each other, with the internet, with cell phone tower. If anything is interfering with EMF, um, that would interfere with your device ability to function as well. So
Mhm.
just beware of devices that make those claims. Today, the only real way to block EMF is to block them either at a device level, but then your device does not communicate, or from reaching your body, which is what we're doing with HAVN.
Right. So, tell me first about some of the symptoms that someone might be experiencing if they are in a very high EMF kind of environment. I realize that the sensitivity of an individual is going to differ pretty
Absolutely.
widely, um, but if you think or suspect that you might be impacted by some of the EMFs in your environment, what kinds of signs and signals might you experience?
Yeah, there is emerging science around a condition called EHS,
Mhm,
hypersensitivity syndrome, which is that some people can actually feel EMF and get specific symptoms when exposed to it. The most often reported symptoms, and bear in mind this is still emerging science,
mhm,
but are headaches, brain fog, fatigue, impact on sleep quality,
mhm,
um, and tinnitus, which is ringing in the ear. These are the most widely reported symptoms from people who suffer from too much EMF exposure. However, the majority of the population won't necessarily feel their EMF exposure, which doesn't mean that your body is not reacting to them. So we've done pre-studies on the impact of wearing HAVN, which would be the equivalent of removing EMF exposure, and there are scientific studies that have done the same with our products, just like with and without EMF. And we're finding that in real life settings, in about 70% of subjects, there's an average of a 20% improvement on heart rate variability, which is one of the body's best indicator to resilience and stress that your body is under. Similarly, we've done electroencephalogram testing, so EEG, and we found that when we're blocking EMF from a cell phone from reaching the brain, we're seeing significant improvement on alpha brainwaves and beta brainwaves compared to similar to going back to baseline with no exposure compared to when you're exposed without a HAVN hat. So while you might not necessarily feel the symptoms, your body is most likely responding to EMF exposure. And we can get into the why if your audience is interested in
Yeah,
diving more into.
absolutely. Yeah. I would love some more expansion on that. But the one thing I wanted to ask you, the research that you're doing, so you're primarily looking at the wearing HAVN, which is an EMF blocking hat, right? You've got the hat on here for those of you who are watching the video. I know you also sell different beanies as well. So protecting the head, I would presume, is probably the priority. However, I know you have other products like protecting the torso with a shirt and a few other things. So, is the research that you're doing primarily focused on protecting the head, or are you also utilizing or doing research on some of the other types of protection?
Yeah, we're definitely looking at it holistically, and so looking at protecting most organs. We
Mhm.
actually started with underwear, funny enough, because I was scratching my own itch, and I keep my cell phone in my pocket when I'm out and about. And so that was, there's a lot of science on the impact of EMF and fertility, as well as testosterone production. So this is where we started. And generally speaking, the way that we are looking at it is your body is what's called a lossy medium, meaning that it absorbs radiation. So the more protection an organ is going to have, so the more tissue is in between the air and your organ, the less EMF will reach that organ. And so less exposure likely equals less impact.
Mhm.
When we're looking at genitals, when we're looking at brain, these are organs that have very little tissue between themselves and the potential emission source. When it comes to the brain, you have a very thin skull, and that's it. When it comes to the genitals for men, again, they're not inside your body; they're outside of it. So these are organs that are going to be specifically more likely to be impacted, especially because they are organs that have a high density of voltage-gated calcium channels, which are, if we go to cellular, at a cellular level, which are thought to be the main reason why EMF can interfere with our cellular processes.
Right. So tell me a little bit more about that. So I know that there has been research done on mitochondrial function. That's
Yep.
something that we talk a lot about because many of my listeners have chronic illness or know somebody who does. And so we do talk a lot about the implications of mitochondrial dysfunction and how that plays a role in the inability, particularly to get well overall. So tell us a little bit about how EMF is impacting mitochondrial function.
Yeah. So EMF, as we mentioned, are electromagnetic fields, and our body relies on electrical signals as part of its main signaling functions to communicate between cells and between tissues. One of the main mechanisms by which those electrical signals are being transferred is through voltage-gated calcium channels. They're essential in controlling the flow of calcium ions into cells, and those calcium ions, besides strengthening your bones, play a critical role in a lot of our physiological processes. Because of the electrical nature of EMF, some studies have shown that EMF can activate those voltage-gated calcium channels and essentially create an abnormal influx of calcium ions into the cells, which is the starting point for a series of damaging biochemical reactions that start in the mitochondria. So one of the immediate consequences of that increase in intracellular calcium is that it will disrupt the normal function of the electron transport chain in the mitochondria, which is a critical component of the cellular respiration, which in turn leads to electron leakage and results in the formation of what's called free radicals or reactive oxygen species. The end result of all those mitochondrial reaction from that electron leakage is superoxide, which is typically managed by your antioxidants in your body, but when you have an excessive production of those free radicals, this can lead to oxidative stress, which is at the root cause of a lot of symptoms of chronic diseases, as well as can be associated with the onset of longer-term diseases. So they contribute to DNA damage, as well as it's probably the closest you would have to an inflamed state. For people who want to get I've just nerded out for like the last 5 minutes. So like the easiest way of explaining this is your body can produce free radicals when exposed to environmental stressors, when lacking sleep, when lacking proper nutrition, lacking exercise. These free radicals are typically counteracted by antioxidants. But when your concentration of free radical increases is above the level that can be typically managed by antioxidants, you enter a state of oxidative stress, which if you cut an apple in two and you let it sit on the counter, the brown that you're seeing on the apple is oxidation, which is effectively what's happening in your cells or in your tissues when you're entering a state of oxidative stress that continues for too long. So hopefully this is still hopefully I haven't lost half the people on this podcast.
No,
in the
I
last
think
5
that's
minutes.
great. Well, I will try to lighten it up a little bit for those who are swimming right now in intellectual conversation. But I think ultimately what I want to get across to people is the importance of limiting your exposure to EMF and how one might be able to do that. What are the biggest emitters of EMF in our modern day society?
So unfortunately, the amount of exposure that we're under has been increasing exponentially in recent years. What the most important concept to understand is that the level of exposure that we have is inversely proportional to the distance of the source. Meaning, if you move your cell phone twice as far away from your body, you're going to reduce emissions by 8 times. So the biggest culprit when it comes to our daily EMF exposure are the closest emission sources from your body. Your cell phone is likely going to be one of them. If you are wearing any wearables, some of them are better conceived than others. Aura, for instance, is doing an amazing job at keeping EMF levels really low for their Oura ring. I'm not affiliated with the company. A lot of smartwatches emit as much EMF as a cell phone.
Mhm.
Your Wi-Fi router, depending on where it is, if it is placed in your home next to an area where you're spending a lot of time, um, it is likely to be a high contributor as well. And then depending on where 5G antennas or cell phone towers might be, depending on where you're living or where you're working, you might also get quite a bit of exposure from this. It's going to depend on where you're located, which again is why I recommend people to get an EMF meter to be able to properly assess the spaces where you're living and working, because everyone's going to be different. But the devices that you're wearing on your body or areas that you're entering, such as a car, especially electric cars, can be particularly high in EMF exposure because it's connecting to your devices. You have a battery that is also emitting EMF, and sometimes your car is even connected to the internet. So um, the again, the main rule is that I would try and apply is when you have devices that are on your body that are connected, and you don't need them, try and move them away from your body. So when you're entering your home, take your cell phone away from your pocket and put it on the table. If you're sleeping at night, turn off your router that emits Wi-Fi, and that's going to limit already quite a bit of exposure as well at night. And move that router away from your bedroom, and move your cell phone away from your head at night, or put it on airplane mode.
Okay, so you mentioned 5G, and I really want to get into this because so many people have argued that 5G is just better, I I don't know. I mean, I don't know about you. I don't know if you're living in France now, but I don't see a huge improvement in any kind of functionality on my phone whatsoever when it's in 5G. So I don't know where the better comes from. So I'd love to know, what is the difference between 5G and any of the previous iterations?
5G is a much more powerful type of radiation that allows for faster uh, s- transfer speed and faster data speed. What that means effectively is that we're able to operate technologies that previously might have been uh, too intense in terms of the simplest form would be in terms of internet power, if you will, computing power that gets transmitted through the air. And we now get to operate these wirelessly. So the
Mhm.
best example of 5G enabling new modern technologies are self-driving cars, which require to transmit a lot of information at a high speed, especially if you're going to coordinate a lot of those self-driving cars. So there is a benefit to continuing improving on those technologies. Now, when it comes to EMF, if you want faster speed, that means more powerful waves. Those waves don't travel as far as less powerful waves. The higher the frequency, the lower the wavelength, meaning that those radiation don't travel as far, and you require about 10 times more antenna to power 5G compared to 4G. So you have a lot more speed, a lot more power, but you're also getting a lot more exposure, especially because we don't remove those 4G antennas. So generally speaking, we're likely to continue evolving towards a society of more and more exposure. But you mentioned France before. I live in the US, but there has been a number of European countries or cities that have halted 5G deployment, and actually in the States as well, including here in California, due to the health concerns of continuing to increase exposure while not having tested these latest levels of exposure. And when it comes to the research, we're always lagging behind because if it takes 10 years to do a study on DNA damage on rats, which is the latest big study that was done by the National Toxicology Program, which is part of the NIH here.
Mhm.
They did a study between 2010 and 2019 or 2020. That study was done uh, on EMFs that were used by cell phones without internet, just voice and text back then. And there has been 3 generations of EMF technology that have gone through in between the start of this study and the completion of it.
Mm.
So we don't know what the effect of all those higher level EMF, as well as just the cumulative effect of all those Wi-Fi, cell phone antennas, wearables, connected cars, connected home, is going to have in the long run. And hopefully it's not too bad, but it could. And so, just like with any technology, there's a lot of good that is coming out of it. Again, self-driving cars sounds amazing, especially if it can reduce casualties on the road. But that also means more exposure. And so, just like with every bit of modern improvement that we've had, it's always a double-edged sword. And learning and understanding how you can mitigate that impact is super important. And if we take car for a second, the improvement between riding horses to driving cars is pretty fantastic. But it also means that if you crash, you're more likely to die.
Right.
And so we invented seat belts. That doesn't solve everything, but that helps a lot. And so the same applies for EMF exposure or pollutants in cities or what have you.
Right. So, where do we go from here? Obviously, you have a company that is going to help protect people from EMF exposure. Is that something that you forecast as being commonplace? People just building these kinds of protections into their clothing on a regular basis?
That's that is today really the only viable solution that exists if you want to reduce your exposure um, sustainably and in the long term. Outside of moving to a place which is more remote and removing devices from your life, which sounds amazing. Unfortunately, on my end, I live in a busy city. So even if I were removing Wi-Fi from my home, even if I didn't have a cell phone, I'd still be exposed to all the ambient Wi-Fi, cell phones, and connected everything that is surrounding me. And so um, I think as the word is getting out. People have a rightful need to want to reduce their exposure, just like you would want to reduce the impact of UV on your skin. That's why you're wearing sunscreen. And so with HAVN, we've tried to create a solution that does not require changing our habits, removing technology from our life, or anything else. If you're already wearing underwear, a t-shirt, and a hat, you can just swap out whatever you're wearing for HAVN, and you can go on about your life while having a significant reduction in your daily EMF exposure. So I think we're going to go more and more towards a society where people are taking a proactive stance on how they're handling health, and especially with regards to what they're putting into their body and what they're exposing their bodies to, because it's a lot easier to remove the source of potential ailment and to do prevention than it is to actually cure it when it happens.
Mhm. Right. And so on that note, are you seeing people, and maybe this is out of kind of the realm of what you're looking at and studying, but are you seeing a greater impact of EMF on the everyday average person to the point where um, obviously our health is declining? Let's just start there, right? I think that's pretty obvious to anybody who looks at a picture of a beach in the 1970s, for example. So we know that our health is overall on the decline. So how much do you suspect EMF could be contributing to that?
I cannot answer that question, and I don't think anyone in the world can.
Yeah.
Again, because first of all, as I mentioned, our level of exposure today is already drastically different from what it was 5 years ago. And this one is drastically different from where it was in the 2000s. There are a number of uh, conditions that have started ramping up as we ramped up EMF, which could have some link, such as male fertility has been on a very steep decline since the 2000s. A decline that started earlier than this, but that accelerated in the years 2000, and we're losing about 2.6% of male fertility every year. And on the other hand, you have a number of peer-reviewed studies that have shown that EMF can impact fertility. So how much of that 2.6% decline is due to EMF? We don't know. Is our EMF contributing to this? Very likely. And so similarly for anything that is long-term ailments or diseases, it's rarely a matter of one thing causing everything. We mentioned before the importance of sleep, diet, exercise, and reducing our exposure to pollutants. And those pollutants can be the pollution industry, it can be plastic in our water, it can be a lot of different things. And ultimately, it's the combination of making those right choices that I think are going to keep us healthy in the long run. And it takes a lot more time than what we've had so far to really understand the precise impact of one stressor in particular. So when you take tobacco, between the first studies that came out to understanding how much more likely you are to get lung cancer if you're smoking, it was dozens of years, and I'm not even sure if we have like exact data around this. We just know it does increase quite a bit your risk of lung cancer.
Right. So if we reverse engineered, are you looking at, for example, sperm counts, with men who are wearing the HAVN underwear? Is the sperm count increasing? Are you looking at like those kinds of data pieces?
So when it comes to sperm count specifically, you don't need to wait for us. There has been the last peer-reviewed study that came out looked at over 6,000 samples across 25 peer-reviewed study. That was a meta study that I'm mentioning, which essentially showed that both sperm count and sperm quality were negatively affected by EMF. When it comes to HAVN, we have a couple dozen of what we call the HAVN babies, which are couples who were struggling to conceive, who got the underwear, and 3 months to 12 months later have a baby and hit us up, or like get pregnant and share that story with us, which always keeps us going. Can we attribute it solely to a HAVN? Hard to tell, but these are always incredible stories. It's very hard to do a proper study on sperm count. You need actually proper you need a lot of different samples, because depending on when you're donating, you might have your sperm count can go from 1 to 2 without you changing much in your life. So you need a lot of averages on the same individual to actually get that data. So we don't ask our customers to send us sperm count samples or anything, but we love hearing about those babies when we do hear about them.
Okay, so anecdotally, obviously you've heard about the babies. What kinds of other stories have come across your desk as a result of people who have utilized some of your products?
So we've got two things. We've got the early studies that we've done. I believe I've mentioned electroencephalogram testing, heart rate variability in the past. So these are proper data that we've been able to gather. On an anecdotal side, it's always stories where it's hard to make sure that HAVN is the only reason why people have experienced it. But we've had stories of people with brain cancer that kept coming back, and their doctor saying that the heavy phone usage that they've had might have been a contributor in this factor, because the tumor was right next to the ear, right ear or left ear that they were using their cell phone with, and then they got a Haven beanie and went to remission, and that thing never came back. And what that person was telling us is, I'll now never leave without my Haven beanie. I left once in vacation and I forgot it, and I turned around and I drove another 2 hours to go get it back.
Mm. Yeah.
um, which are obviously amazing stories. And then people who suffer from certain symptoms who find a lot of relief in wearing Haven, particularly with tinnitus, the ring in the ear, which can really drive people crazy because you
Yeah.
don't have anything that you can actually do with regards to relieving this. There's nothing you can do with regard to relieving, getting relief from that symptom. And some people are able to either reduce it significantly or completely remove it by wearing our products. While also others have tried and see no improvement. So again, everyone's body and biology is different, and I'm not claiming here to sell a cure to any of this. But these are the anecdotal stories that we hear that obviously keep us uh, warm our heart whenever we hear them.
Yeah, well, something I actually just noticed is that you were talking about people with brain cancer and putting their cell phones to their ears. You and I are both wearing wired earbuds.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about some of the precautions that you take after learning about EMF to limit your exposure.
Yeah. Oh, I love that question as well because there is so much you can do without buying any of our products. Um, so you mentioned wired headphones.
Hmm.
I know this is less convenient than earbuds, wireless earbuds. I get it for anyone listening. However, if you do get an EMF meter and you measure those things, the level of EMF exposure or EMF emission that the most popular devices out there emit is insane. We're talking about the equivalent of a cell phone for each of these. And your auditive canal is a direct access to your brain with
Mm.
very little tissue in between. So, especially because then you're wearing these, if you're listening to music, if you're doing call, if you're doing whatever, think about it from the perspective of like having two cell phones strapped to your head for however many hours. That is the very first change that I would really beg anyone to do is get wired headsets. They're super cheap as well.
Yeah.
So go for it. The second thing, we mentioned it, I believe, is take your cell phone away from your pocket. If you're listening to this and your cell phone is in your pocket and you have a table in front of you, easy. Put it on the table as far away as possible. Do not put your cell phone on airplane mode at night. And especially do not sleep with your cell phone under your pillow. I keep hearing about people who do that so they can hear their alarm or feel it buzz or not wake up their partner. And I get it as someone who's recently married. But the level of exposure that you're getting during 8 hours a night with that cell phone right under your pillow is huge. And if you're gonna do it under the pillow, please put it on airplane mode. Move your Wi-Fi router away from your bedroom, away from any area where you're spending a lot of time, and ideally turn it off at night, either by programming it. A lot of routers can be programmed to be off at night, or by buying a programming plug or unplugging it yourself. You don't even need to buy anything. When you go to bed and plug it back in when you're in the morning. I don't think anyone needs Wi-Fi at night when they're sleeping. Um, these are probably the easiest changes you can make in your life outside of wearing Haven, but I'm biased here. Um, but that, more seriously, these are the easiest changes you can make that don't cost any money, and that will already go a long way with regards to reducing EMF exposure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the Wi-Fi router at night is a big one that's been talked about extensively, really, in the Lyme community because of the huge impact that it can have for those who do have, some kind of sensitivity in particular. But one of the tips that they used to give is to use like a Christmas tree timer to
Mm-hmm.
have
Yep.
the router actually just automatically shut off. So that you really don't have to think about it. It can be kind of inconvenient if you're up late watching a movie or something and all of a sudden your Wi-Fi goes off. But,
But
I
then
don't
move
know.
it to a later time. Like
Yeah, yeah,
if you know that you typically go to bed at, let's say, 9 p.m., shut it off at 11, 12, 1
right,
a.m. It's better
right,
than leaving it on all night. Like I'd
right.
rather you shut it off between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. If you're waking up at 6, and then you're sure you'll have your Wi-Fi whenever you're up, but at least you have so many hours where it's off. And then if you think about
Yeah.
a day being 24 hours, and you're sleeping 8 out of those 24, which I'm hoping for everyone that's the case, or wishing you to find that time. Well, that's almost a third of your life that you're going to be spending sleeping. So if you can at least remove your Wi-Fi, fortunately, you can't do much about your neighbor's Wi-Fi or and cell phone towers in your area, etc. But that's already one source that is going to be way closer to you for the most part
Right.
that you can remove.
Absolutely. Okay, so we are reaching the end of our podcast here. I ask every single one of our guests, Arthur, 8 questions.
Okay.
These are rapid fire questions. They're just designed to give us a little bit of insight into who you are as a person and what makes you tick. So, are you ready?
I don't know if I'm ready, but let's let's try
All right, number one, if you could choose only one natural remedy for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Sleep
Awesome.
all day. I mean, not sleeping all day, but the difference between a good night of sleep and a bad night of sleep makes such a big difference on your biology, your mood. I think this is the number one change I would make for anyone who's not feeling good is try and get more sleep.
Absolutely. All right, number two, tell us something most people don't know about you.
Huh. This is supposed to be rapid fire. What do most people, I mean, most people don't know me all that well. I'm not a massive celebrity. I I absolutely obsess over longevity, and especially like I've seen two of my grandparents battle cancer, and that really put me on a journey to understand how we can live longer. And I actually really believe that based on the improvement on science, people our generation are likely to live to 150. So I'm really hoping I'm going to win that bet with my friends who are telling me that I'm going to die but when I'm sick when I'm 50. So doing good so far.
Okay. All right, number three, if I were to compile a playlist of happy music, what song would you suggest be added?
This is not a question for me because I live in Los Angeles and I'm probably the best person to live in LA for all the celebrities out there because I don't know any actor's name, any musicians, or very little. And if I'm listening to songs that I like, I don't know what the title of that song is. Um, so I'm gonna pass on that question because the
No worries. All right. Number four, what is your favorite guilty pleasure?
ooh. Uh, I don't know if that's a guilty pleasure, but uh, ice bath. I love an ice bath. The feeling of coming out of this is
Yeah.
insane. That yeah. So I don't know if that's a guilty pleasure because it's really not that enjoyable when you're doing it. But the after is amazing, and
Yeah.
it's not easy to come across an ice bath if you don't have the luxury of owning a cold plunge. So that would
Awesome.
be my answer.
All right, number five, what is the most influential book you've ever read?
I struggle always to answer that question because there are multiple books that I think have been amazing in my life. I've really enjoyed reading Tim Ferriss, and I think his two first books to me have had a really big impact on thinking how I want to live my life. And the Four Body in particular, I think is really interesting and touch on a very important problem in today's society, which is bad science versus good science.
Hmm.
And as a scientist and someone who hear often about the latest scans in the EMF world, which have 25 to 30 peer-reviewed studies, which are published in pay-to-play newspapers by Russian scientists. I can really attest to the difference between good science and bad science, and I think it's a really important concept for anyone to develop a little bit of critical thinking when hearing about scientific studies or science. And yeah, unfortunately, I think we live in a world where information gets more and more polarized, and where learning a little bit about this and exercising that critical thinking is extremely important.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's been a long time since I've read that book. I don't remember when it was published, but
2008, 10? I
it
don't know.
was
I'm old now.
probably around then. Yeah. All right. What does the word revolution mean to you?
Um, I it, to me, this is just about anything that has a massive impact on the way we live our lives. Um, and so I believe we're living one right now with AI. And I think AI is going to have an impact on multiple aspects of our lives, jobs, but also our ability to deal with health and process data and get much more granular um, uh, and personalized advice for ourselves. So I think when I'm hearing revolution, that's where my head goes, like something that impacts society at multiple levels. And I think it's rare to find one of these, but internet was one of them, and AI is definitely another one. Uh, and we'll see what the next one is.
All right. What does the word remedy mean to you?
uh, when I, if I hear remedy, I'm hearing you haven't. Ideally, something you don't want to be using. Um, yeah, I mean, I think of remedy as a solution to a problem where I think where I like to focus is trying to prevent the problem in the first place or
Mm,
catch it as soon as possible. So, not a bad word, but not one that I love hearing because I prefer to stay healthy.
awesome. All right. Now, lastly, if you could impart one piece of wisdom onto our listeners, what would that be?
I think the best piece of advice is we live in a world where we're hearing a lot of different information. We mentioned the critical thinking part before, but I think the other part is staying positive. We've just done a whole podcast talking about the negative effect of EMF and the fact that it's everywhere. Now, that's not to say that it's all doom and gloom and we're all going to die. I think it's important to um, stay informed and understand what can impact our lives, and in particular when it comes to our health, and do the maximum we can while not forgetting to live life. And one example that I like to take is fast food. I think we all know here, if you're listening to Erin, that uh, eating fast food is bad for you. Now, does that mean that you can't have fast food once in a while? And that you can't have your own guilty pleasures that don't need to be an ice bath? Yeah, you probably should. Now, should you be eating it every day? Probably not. Um, but there is a balance here, and I think, yeah, there is life is beautiful, and it's important to not forget to live it, even when trying to remove what's negative from it.
Thank you so much, Arthur. It has been a real pleasure. For those of you listening, if you are interested in learning more about the products that we spoke about, you can visit Haven, HAVN, wear.com. He has generously offered a 15% discount code. I'm going to place that down in the comments. So, any of you listening who are interested in getting some of these amazing pieces to protect yourself from the electromagnetic frequencies that are swirling around us and are ever present, sometimes even in our pocket, then please go to havenware.com and protect yourself and your families. Thank you so much, Arthur. It has been a pleasure speaking with you. I told you at the beginning that I have been following your company for a really long time. I think EMF protection is actually very, very important in today's society and becoming even more so. I thank you for your time. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you next time. Take care.
Thank you, Erin, for having me.
Absolutely.
With hope as a guiding light, through darkest days we'll fight the night. With a whole lot of passion, with a whole lot of truth, Remedy Revolution is here for you.